you doing? In the heart of America. Oops. Excuse me while I adjust something. Hyperlapse. So tonight's topic is, on my little drive, is about where does Q come from? Q is short for QAnon, a conspiracy theory-based movement of basement dwellers who've decided that the government is being taken over by a cabal of Satan-worshipping pedophiles who happen to be all Democrats and are running this pedophile ring out of a pizza parlor that is also the secret headquarters of Hillary Clinton. Does it sound ridiculous? Yes, it does. And who believes this kind of stuff? Well, rather than concentrate on who believes it, why don't we concentrate on where we think it's actually coming from? And in my mind, what I see is what I've seen since 2014, but it's been going on for a lot longer than that, is that there are a lot of fascist governments taking over in Eastern Europe with the aid and assistance of the Kremlin. It is well known, it is well known that the Kremlin has a cyber warfare unit. As a matter of fact, if you look hard enough, you can find out who's in this unit and where they're based and what their number is. I don't have all that information, but I know it exists. And this unit's job is to do what's called a psychological warfare operation, which is to destabilize any opposing force to the Russian military, and to basically create a situation where people would be willing to let that said military into their countries and would consider them to be their friends as opposed to their enemies. That's the goal of any psychological operation. There are many countries that have such units. The United States is one of those countries. Russia is and has been using their psychological operations There's a saying that goes, beware the Russians invade in August. Well, 100 years to the date that the Russians mobilized and thus really began the First World War, a war which they did not fare well in at all. They were yet again mobilizing and attacking a small country to the west, which used to be a part of the greater Russian Empire known as the Soviet Union, and that was Ukraine. And the reason they were attacking them is because Ukraine formerly had a fascist dictatorship government that was favorable to the Russians. And they had a revolution and kicked out their the leader that was favorable to the Russians, the same leader who had ties to the Trump administration, by the way, and went on a course that was more democratic and more. Putin and his empire could not handle it, began psychological warfare operations, began what they call a low-level conflict, which means that the Russians are involved but not directly involved. They started a secessionist movement on the eastern side to try and take out Ukraine. They invaded Crimea and claimed that actually belonged to Russia, not to Ukraine. And there is still this war going on to this day in Ukraine. If you want to see what the history of the United States might be like, just all you have to do is just look at Ukraine. So now we have a psychological warfare operation happening in the United States, which is similar to the same thing that's been going on all over the world, all over Eastern Europe. And we really have two places to look to see where it's coming from: Russia and China. I would be more inclined to look at Russia over China. Because Russia has interfered in our elections, has been caught red-handed doing all of these things, and now we have, oh, hello, and now we have the same thing happening here that's been happening all over the world, with Russia's fingerprints all over it. And I would invite people who are involved in the Q movement to please take a step back and look at what's happening and start aiming the funny thing is, there is a conspiracy about, but you are aiming at the wrong people, and you are aligning yourselves with the wrong people. You are aligning yourselves with America's enemies, not against your own people. So we have an outgoing administration that has direct ties to Russia, a person who would refuse to hold Russia accountable for all the things they've been doing. A person who is it's been claimed that he's had been compromised by Russia and Russian agents, and yet the Q people think he's their hero and their god and he's going to save them. You know, the Russians were really, the reason they launched these operations was because they Russians. I don't mean Russians, I mean Kremlin. Because the Russian people are fine. The Russian people are great people. You know, they would be as apt to be caught up in the middle of all of this as Americans and the rest of the world. But the Kremlin definitely did not like Obama. They do not like Biden. And they did not like Hillary. By the way, I'm not a big fan of Hillary either. But they really were afraid of them because they knew that these people would interfere with and had said things against their operations. They wanted to run roughshod through the world and do the things that they want to do. And what's their goal? Well, Their goal is to their superpower status. And they want to create a Russian-based sphere of influence in the world. Not just in Europe, but in the world. They want to be the number one head honchos of the world, and they want to oppose everybody that stands against them. These kind of things only lead to like war and death and destruction. Globalist. I don't know what a globalist is by definition. Who was maybe fit that description, but I would tend to agree with her that we should try and get along with everyone in the world. And let's talk about the charges of socialism, shall we? The people who are the oligarchs trying to run Russia as a dictatorship now are former agents of the Soviet Union who wanted to run the quote-unquote dictatorship of the proletariat, which is this idea that a cabal of very smart people should take over the government and tell people what to do until the utopian socialist paradise would come along and just naturally happen. Well, a dictatorship is a dictatorship, and you find out that these so-called quote-unquote smart people aren't that much smarter than anybody else. And absolute power corrupts absolutely, and you have these same people who used to have power of life over death over people. Remember, Putin was a KGB agent who worked in Eastern Germany, who worked out of Berlin. And his job was to try and basically he just tried to keep all the paperwork on people, quote unquote disloyal, keep people inside the Soviet Union in and the Westerners out, intelligence and counterintelligence operations. When he came to power with the idea that he was going to surround himself with his buddies and he was going to steal the apparatus of the state and hand it out to his friends, which is what they did. You remember, Soviet Union was a quote-unquote socialist paradise, which means that the government owned everything. So when it became, when the Soviet Union died and became the Russian Federation, all of this stuff that had formerly belonged to the people was suddenly claimed by a few individuals, and the rest was just kind of sold off to these ready-made billionaires who just happened to be the people who were dishonest and just stole everything. I mean, imagine if we woke up from a nightmare where at least we knew that the government apparatus was up for grabs. We would want to have kind of a fair system where the whole thing would be auctioned off. But nope, that wasn't a fair system. It was just give it to our buddies, claim it all. Putin lives in a palace. And that's his vision of the world. Strong men and their buddies running a dictatorship over the world, almost in the same model, in the same vein as the Soviet Socialist Republic, which they used to be the head honchos of. However, when things change over from that type of socialism to the other type of socialism, we have a name for it. It's called National Socialism or Fascism. And these people, the Kremlin, loves to go around and saying they're fighting against fascists. They hate fascists, but look at what they're doing. Look at who represents them. They are people who hate minorities on the streets, and they look for people to hurt and beat up and to kill that aren't like them. They've gone after homosexuals. They've gone after anybody who isn't part of their religion, which I don't want to speak ill of the Orthodox Church because I know it doesn't represent the church. But if there's anything close to a state religion, which is the religion of Putin, it's Eastern Orthodox Christianity. Yeah, so tell me what the differences are between the Kremlin now and Adolf Hitler's chancellery in the 1930s and 1940s. And now that we have learned how to weaponize the internet, we're using the internet to snare a whole bunch of people who are looking for simple answers to life's complicated problems. And now we have things like QAnon. Somebody asked me, well, wouldn't it be great if we could go find who Q really is and go arrest him? And say, well, yeah, but the FBI does. And we pretty much know who Q is. Q is that unit in the Kremlin, that cyber warfare unit, and people here in the United States who have fallen hook, line, and sinker, who are ready and willing to kick open the door and welcome the Soviet military into the United States as an occupation force. Does that sound far-fetched? It isn't really. I mentioned it to somebody who I know in my family who's like a pro-Trump person. I said, this is what I think is going on. And I said, and they were like, well, that's so far-fetched. We're not going to welcome the Soviet military. And I said, yes, we will. Because if things get crazy here, where people are doing violent acts of terrorism and sedition here in this country and succeed in breaking down the federal government to the point that here we are, a superpower with major stockpiles of nuclear weapons, and we are now former superpower, destabilized. There will be called national force to come in and make sure that our nuclear stockpile is secured. And who would be at the head of that force? You guessed it. The Soviet Union. The Russian Federation. I'm reminded of a joke. A comedian once said, and I think this was probably back in the 1970s, said, yeah, the Soviets, they're peaceful people. They just want to have a warm water port. New Orleans would do. So I think that if people are so busy and have a lot of time on their hands and are so disillusioned and disenfranchised with the way things are going in the world, then instead of researching these Q drops and everything else, maybe they should research where these Q drops are really coming from, trace it to its source, and start rallying people to the cause of, hey, is a free and independent country. We don't want Soviet, Russian, Kremlin interference in our elections. We don't want Soviet, Kremlin interference in our internal affairs. We need to get rid of all the politicians by voting them out who are sympathetic to this, who are helping and aiding, abetting our enemies. Yeah. I'm going to have to continue this conversation later because I'm at my destination. So thanks. Please like, subscribe, and thanks for watching and commenting.